Well, hello there. This is Craig Hain, and I want to tell you about some books I've just written that I think if you are interested in math education, you're a parent or a teacher or a student interested in math education, you want to know what is the ideal way to provide a student an optimal math education given modern technology. I've just written some books that I believe will explain it to you. You're going to find very interesting. And I want to thank Amazon so much for the ability to do this. They have their print on demand thing today. And I call these Dr. Dell, that's what my students call me, Golden Rule Math for 21st century math students. And I'm going to tell you about this book in a moment. It's about a 50-page book, and you can read it in about an hour and learn a lot about math education. I'm going to tell you a little more about it in detail, but I actually have written 4 books altogether. One then is particularly aimed at struggling math students, which has a lot of students today, and they don't have to be today, given modern 21st century math education abilities. Successful students is another book I've written, because once a student is successful, they want to maintain success, and what is success? I'll tell you about that book. And finally, for STEM math students, students that might be interested in science and engineering, what's called STEM today, science, technology, engineering, and math. And each one of these books is about 50 pages long and can be read in probably about an hour. They're not teaching you math, they're teaching about math education. And I want to tell you now about these books in some detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen with you and tell you a little bit about each one of these books. Now, first of all, you're going to go to goldenrulemath.com. That's the website. And it says the Golden Rule Math book series explains how and why 21st century math education is amazingly different and better than 20th century math education. Now, these books will explain that, but by 20th century math education, that's what I call the standard math curriculum being taught by most schools today and by most math textbooks. And that's what these Golden Rule books are going to explain to you about what you could and should be doing today. Now, there are 3 main reasons that every parent and every student should know about that these books explain. First of all, there's incredible free 21st century math tools, 2009, that came out that makes algebra and geometry and trigonometry and calculus and differential equations much easier to learn, much easier to master, much easier to solve the problems. In fact, it's 100 times easier. And in fact, what's happened is this tool, it's called Wolfram Alpha, has reduced the math barrier that's been there traditionally. Now, that's for students that are going to go a little further on in math. But better than that, there's technologies today that make what I call spike pedagogy, which the books are going to explain to you, much better for teaching math than for traditional ways of teaching math, particularly in groups. And it's very good for students of all types, particularly struggling students. It solves their problem. And most importantly of all today is proper content, the proper content for different categories of students. And that's what these books are going to explain. Now, when you move down, you're going to find out there's 4 books in this series. The first one is 21st century math students, Golden Rule Math for 21st century math students. Now, that's a sort of, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, and that's probably the first one you ought to read. Then if you have a struggling student, I'll give you more information in a book specifically for struggling students. If you have a successful math student, and once the struggling student is successful, how do you keep them that way? And what does it really even mean? And finally, a book for STEM students. So there's 4 of these books. And then there's a special offer that goes along with this you can look at once you've studied the books. Now, let me tell you about these books. If you click on this tab here, it'll take you to a new web page, Golden Rule Math for all 21st century math students. And what will happen is now, once again, it tells you the reasons you want to know this. You can go and buy this book on Amazon in paperback form, this book right here that you see up in the video, for $4.99. Or you can get a Kindle version of it. A lot of people like to read their books on Kindle for 99 cents. Or you can download your free PDF copy of it right from this website. It's free. And I also have a video here that explains what this book is about. So you can watch that video. Probably want to download your free PDF and look at it. And we're going to look at that in a moment. And then you may or may not want to go buy one on Amazon. Now, a lot of people like to get a hard copy because they like to take notes in it. They like to share it with other people and say, here, read this or whatever. Other people want to use Kindle, and that's fine, whatever you want to do. Now, let me show you the PDF of this book so you'll see what you're going to get. And this is free now. You can download it. Dr. Dell's Golden Rule Math for 21st Century Students. And of course, what it says right off the bat, right below is 21st Century Technologies and Tools. 21st century revolutionizes and transforms math education. That's what you need to know as a parent or a student or a teacher. This is transformative. And so that makes it much, much better for all 21st century math students. The reason I call this the Golden Rule books, by the way, is I've been teaching math for a long, long time. And how would I want to be taught today, knowing what I know about math, using modern tools? Well, how would I want to be taught math today? Using the latest tools, 21st century tools. And that's what this book is all about. That's why I call it the Golden Rule Math for 21st century students. These new technologies revolutionize it. Now, in order to understand that, let's go look at the table of contents to see what you're going to get in this book. First of all, I start out with a foreword. Now, this foreword was written by Debbie Goodman, who's been working with me for a long, long time on different companies. And Triad Math is the company that we have now that's about 10 years old. And she wrote the foreword to this. It's about 3.5 pages. And you should, if nothing else, read Debbie's foreword. Download the PDF and read it. Take 10 minutes to read it. And if that doesn't convince you that these books are going to tell you a lot of things you need to know about math education, nothing's going to, because she really tells you what you need to know. Now, this particular book has several chapters here. For the first 5 chapters is, well, first of all, my introduction is a typical homeschool story. I like to tell stories. And so this is a story that happened with me and a homeschool parent with her students. The first chapter is about struggling students. And today there's an awful lot of students that are struggling with math, post-elementary math in particular. And for lots of reasons, I explain very briefly, what you can do about that. What about successful students? How do you keep them successful? How do you make them successful? And what do you do for a successful student? Short chapter on that. What if they're not going to go to college? I have a chapter on that. What if they are going to go to college? Chapter on that. What about STEM students? Somebody that might be interested in science and technology. Math's been a great barrier historically. It's no longer today. So these 5 chapters go over this pretty quickly. Now, I have a special book then for struggling students, another one for successful students, and another one for STEM students. So I want to go deeper into it in these other books. But here's what you're going to learn. First of all, you're going to learn, and all these books have it, about what I call spike pedagogy. This is the way you should teach math today with the technologies we have available to us. You can't do it in a classroom. You can't really even do it one-on-one tutoring properly. And I explain why that is in chapter 6. So you really need to understand spike pedagogy. This is the essence of math education today, how it should be done. You need 2 things. You need a good teacher and a good coach. And so chapter 7 in this book is all about a teacher and a coach. What are the roles they got to play? Now, it turns out that most parents can be a good coach, or they can get someone locally that is a good coach. The teacher's the hard part. And it turns out there's a program today where I can be your teacher and you can be the coach. Well, how do you be a great coach? Now, this is a very deep thing. What's the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? What are the learning techniques that a student should engage in to learn math? And that's in chapter 8. So these 3 chapters here are in all the books. Spike pedagogy, you've always got to understand that. Teacher and coach, you got to understand it. How to be a great coach. The last thing that's in all the books is a description of a 21st century math program. So you can use that as a model. You may not want to use our program. You may have a different one, but compare whatever you're going to do to what I'm telling you here is the model. And I give you all the information you need about a 6-tier program that starts with the most basic math to get a struggling students on the right path, get their psychology right, all the way down through calculus and differential equations for STEM students. And this chapter 9 explains that. So that's what this book is about. I highly recommend that you start by reading the foreword, and that will probably motivate you then to read the entire book. And then once you've done that, you may say, well, I've got a struggling student. I want to know more than you told me in this short chapter. So I've got a book specifically on struggling students. And here's a table of content. I start off and I tell you a homeschool story, another one about a parent that had a struggling student. And chapter 1 then is called Math ? Help. And this is gets into deeper into what to do with a struggling student. It's kind of like what you should do as a coach to help your struggling student. And then, of course, proper content is very, very important for a struggling student. How do you get them on the right path? That's chapter 2. Spike pedagogy, I already told you about that. Everybody needs to know spike pedagogy. Teacher and coach, I mentioned that. How to be a great coach. These are all chapters that you've read in the first book, and so you're going to review them. They're the same chapter. These 3 chapters, spike pedagogy, teacher and coach, and how to be a great coach, are in all the books, because no matter who you're teaching, this is how you need to do it. Now, I'm a believer in stories. They motivate people. So I have a story in chapter 6. Grace Libman was one of our wonderful students that was struggling tremendously from the very beginning, and she finally discovered what I'm teaching you about here, Triad Math program, and it turned her around. And she gives testimonials to that, and it's just a wonderful story. And I have lots of other stories like that, but hers was very dramatic. Then I tell Craig's story. Now, Craig, that's me, Craig Hain. Dr. Dell to my students, but to you, to parent, I'm Craig. I have a story that's very different than Grace's. I succeeded for a long time, then I failed in the 9th grade, in fact, when Algebra 1. And that could have been the end of my story. It was for many students. I was lucky. I was saved by 2 marvelous teachers, and I tell about that. And then I've been gone. And so I went from being a failure in the 9th grade in high school. 10 years later, I had a PhD in mathematics. Now that I tell that story. And then chapter 8 is once again talking about the math that you could be teaching your student if you use my program. And if you can find a program that's better than that or equally good, fine. Although you're going to find out my program is extremely cost effective thanks to modern technologies. And that's all explained then. Now, that's for successful students. Let's say, well, that was for struggling students. I have a successful student. Well, this is a table of contents for successful students. First question is, what is success in math? Now, ask yourself that question. What does it mean to succeed in math? And if your answer is getting a good grade, my answer to that is no, that's not the definition you should be using. And I explain that. Then once I define what success really is, once again, proper content, spike pedagogy, teacher and coach, how to be a great coach. You already know that if you read one of the other books. Then I tell a story. Now, this story is, again, my story that I already told in the Struggling Math book, but I tell it again. Why? Success to failure to success. I was succeeded in math because I was homeschooled, by the way. The first eight grades of my life, I was homeschooled. And I tell that story, how I was homeschooled by my Uncle Jack, who was a wonderful barber and a builder. And he just, and it was math was wonderful. And I helped my students. I was able to actually help to teach some of my students math. And then in the 9th grade, I failed. And I was told I was a failure and I couldn't go on to college even. And then I was saved by 2 wonderful teachers. I was just so blessed by that. It's like a miracle. It's like God sent them to me and saved me. And I tell that story. Now, if you have a struggling student, a failing student, I think I can do for that student what those 2 wonderful teachers, Mr. Don O'Hare and Clint Gass, Dr. Clint Gass, did for me. And I tell that story. Once again, what math should you be teaching? There are the 6 tiers. And now some students only go through the first 2 tiers, and then they don't need any more. Some will go through tier 3, and you're going to learn about that. That's if they're going to college. There's some consumer math. But then if they're going to go into STEM, the last 3 tiers are phenomenal, and they need to understand that. But if you're interested in STEM, then you think you might even be, you go to the STEM student book. Now, I start out here in chapter 1, and I talk about STEM math in a nutshell. So in about 4 pages, I tell you what it's about and what you need to do to succeed in it. Once again, spike pedagogy, teacher and coach, and how to be a great coach. But now, when you get into tier 4 and you're learning math for STEM now, which is much, much deeper than anybody teaches in any schools today, I use a tool that no one else is teaching to my knowledge. I haven't seen a program that does it or a textbook that does it. It's called Wolfram Alpha, and I explain that in chapter 10. Now, chapter 10 is a 16-page chapter. It's STEM math, the full story. If you know anybody interested in STEM math, science and technology and engineering, you got to read chapter 10. Just read that chapter. It's a 16, and you will know more about STEM math and what's happened and this modern tool, Wolfram Alpha, that absolutely is transformative. An analogy would be take a smartphone today and compare it to an old landline phone, maybe one that was on a party line, and then compare it to a smartphone today. That's what we're talking about. And I explain that in quite depth with the history behind it in this 16-page chapter. And this is probably the most important chapter for anybody interested in science and engineering that you could read. Just don't read anything else, read that first. There's also a tool today called the supercomputer that does things for you as a STEM student that no ordinary computer does. And I have a chapter 9 on it, tell you about that. So that's what these books are about. They're about educating anybody that's interested in math or math students, educating them about math education. There's no math in these books. I'm not teaching any math in these books. I'm teaching about math education. And that's what I wanted you to know. That is the essence of these 4 books. Now, I thank Amazon for doing it. These books are print on demand from Amazon. And the reason that I could create them and sell them to you for $4.99 a piece or 99 cents on Kindle is because of this wonderful thing that Amazon has done. In fact, I'm going to go back and share my screen. I meant to show you something. I'll show you where you can get these on Amazon. Let me go back to that. I'm going to get rid of these PDFs now to get back to, I had the PDFs drawn up, but you go to Amazon, and here's an example. This is the struggling student book, $4.99 paperback. If you 2-day delivery, Kindle for 99 cents. And by the way, that's how a lot of people, they either want to read it on Kindle if you like Kindle, or they want a hard copy of it to take and read and take notes in and study and review. But you can get the free PDF, as I've already told you, right off of the Golden Rule Math site. You can get the PDFs right there. So you can either buy it on Amazon or get the free PDF. And I highly recommend you do that. It will be life transforming for any math student, whether they're struggling or not struggling, whether they're successful or not. It's life transforming. Even if you have a student that you think is successful now and is successful, let's say they're making a good grade, they're getting through it. If you're not teaching the right content, you're shortchanging them. A student can go through a standard math program today and get A's, straight A's, and be nowhere near ready for a good STEM college program. And that's because of the modern tool. It's radical. And the reason I call it the Golden Rule, I have a PhD in math. I've been teaching math for decades and decades at all different levels, from just starting right out in 7th grade all the way through graduate school. And I love high school level math. I think that's the most important thing we can do for our children today. And I want to empower you to teach math, deliver math education to your students the way I would want it delivered to me, knowing what I know, with the modern technologies and the modern tools. It's phenomenal. For example, our videos now come from Amazon Web Services. And this has empowered us, by the way, to deliver math training today at a much, much, much lower cost to you in terms of both your time and your money, and particularly your students' time, than anything else that you could do. It's the modern technologies. What we can do today is based on literally billions and billions of dollars of technology that's been developed. We use tools we use in our system to deliver, which is, and you're going to learn all about it if you study my system then, and you go to us. You can try it out for free. You're going to find that out. And then if you decide to use it, it's very, very inexpensive compared to anything else you can do. And it's better than anything else you can do. It's better than I could even teach you one-on-one as a tutor. If you paid me $500 an hour, I can't do as good a job for your student as what our system does. And the reason, and if you understand spike pedagogy, you'll know why that is. So am I excited? Sure, I'm excited. I'm excited because we can do things today for our children with this modern 21st century technology that we could never do before. I mean, these books are just amazing, print on demand. For $4.99, one copy at a time. I mean, I was able to do this. I have actually right now I have 14 different books on Amazon for our tiers and other things I'm doing that I couldn't have even considered doing before Amazon's new technology for print on demand. It's just phenomenal, but it goes way beyond that. We use a thing called WooCommerce and MailChimp and Moodle for our learning management system and so on and so forth. You're going to learn all about that in these books. So I'm excited. I hope you are. You need to be. If you know any student that is studying math, whether they're doing well or not doing well, it doesn't make any difference. You need to tell them about the Golden Rule Math book. Just send them to goldenrulemath.com. Tell them to start educating themselves about math education. So this is Craig Hain. My students call me Dr. Dell, and I'll go to do another video. People ask me, why are you called Dr. Dell? Well, there's a double entendre reason for that. I'm actually going to do another video on it, on, who is Dr. Dell and, where did that name come from? That's another video, another story. So thank you for watching the video. Please help students that are studying math learn about these books so they can go in their parents and learn about math education and what they can be doing, because it will be life transforming for them. I guarantee it. So thank you so much for watching the video. Best wishes to you, and please help as many students as you possibly can. I'll perhaps see you then on some other videos. Bye-bye.